I never thought that my daughter's birthday party would end up being the moment she humiliated me in front of everyone I raised her to impress. The crystal chandelier glistened above the grand dining hall, casting its glow on the polished marble floor. My late husband's house, my house, looked magnificent, as it always did. Lily insisted on throwing an extravagant party for her 35th birthday. She said it was, quote, fitting for her future status. I stood quietly near the dessert table, watching her twirl under the adoring gaze of her friends and business acquaintances. My heart twisted. She was still my daughter, but I barely recognized her anymore. Since she married Nathan, that slick real estate developer, her ambition had grown teeth. As the night carried on, Lily approached me with that brittle smile I had come to dread. In her hand was a sleek, leather-bound folder. "Mother," she purred sweetly, far too loudly for our proximity. "Everyone's here. Why don't you make it official tonight? You've talked about transferring the house for months. Let's sign it." The room grew quieter. Heads turned toward us, cameras lifted. I froze, gripping my champagne flute tighter. "Lily, this isn't the time or place." Her smile slipped, replaced by a tight, thin line. "You always say that, Mother, but you're not getting any younger. Nathan says it's best to handle these things while you're still capable." The jab was deliberate. I felt my cheeks flush, but I kept my voice calm. "We can discuss it another day." Her nostrils flared. The silence around us thickened. Nathan stepped closer behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder like a silent threat. And then it happened. Lily grabbed the towering birthday cake from the center table, 3 tiers of fondant and delicate sugar roses, and, in one violent motion, shoved it straight into my face. The crowd gasped. "You selfish old woman," she screamed, her voice sharp enough to slice through the murmurs. "This house should already be mine." The frosting dripped down my chin, cold and sticky, as I stood there, blinking through the mess, hearing the phones clicking, capturing every degrading second. The chandelier's light shimmered across the marble floor, reflecting the cruel glint in her eyes. The house. Always the house. Never the years I had spent holding this family together after my husband passed. Never the sacrifices, the quiet dignity I maintained while they built their lives using my foundation. I finally spoke, my voice as calm as still water. "I said you would inherit it when the time was right," Lily's lip curled. "And when would that be? When you finally drop dead? When you're too senile to know where you are? Why delay the inevitable?" A gasp, a collective, involuntary sound from the watching crowd. Brent placed a hand on her shoulder then. A signal, I knew. But Lily shrugged him off, caught in her own fury. "You don't even need this place. Look at you. You barely leave your study. You live like a ghost already." The words should have cut. Maybe a few years ago they would have. But now I simply felt tired. Not weak. Tired of the charade, the games wrapped in fake smiles and backhanded compliments. I straightened, wiping the frosting from my face with a linen napkin as gracefully as if nothing had happened. "Lily," I said softly, but every syllable landed like a stone. "If you truly believe you're entitled to something that does not yet belong to you, you'll get exactly what you deserve." I turned, walking away from the ballroom full of stares and whispers. My heels echoed down the grand hall as I headed toward my study. The portraits lining the walls watched me with solemn, knowing eyes, my late husband's eyes. They had no idea who they were playing with. Not yet. The door to my study closed with a soft click behind me, sealing off the noise, the whispers, the judgment. My sanctuary. My prison. I leaned against the polished oak door for a moment, exhaling slowly, willing my hands to stop trembling. The heavy silence settled around me like a weighted blanket. Only the faint ticking of the grandfather clock broke it. The party continued outside. Laughter, clinking glasses, more music. As if nothing had happened. As if my daughter hadn't just tried to publicly shame me into surrendering everything I built. I walked to the mirror above the fireplace. The frosting streaks were still there. I wiped my face carefully with a cool, damp cloth, avoiding my own eyes as long as I could. But eventually, I looked. There she was. Me, Evelyn Carrington, widow, matriarch, alone. How did it come to this? On the wall beside the mirror hung the old family portraits. There was Lily, still a teenager in her equestrian gear, her father's proud hand resting on her shoulder. She was always his favorite, his precious little girl. And I never minded. Back then, she was sweet, grateful. But something changed after she married Daniel. I never liked him. The way he sized up this house the first time he visited, how he marveled more at the estate than at my daughter, how his questions, so casually phrased, always circled back to property, assets, bank accounts. I saw his ambition even then, but Lily called it drive. She said he was strategic, resourceful. Now I see he was simply calculating, and now his calculations had infected my daughter too. The tea kettle whistled, breaking my thoughts. I poured myself a cup, the porcelain clinking faintly as I set it down. Chamomile. I needed the calm. Sitting in my old armchair, I stared at the portraits a while longer. My late husband's eyes stared back at me, steady, protective. "What would you do, Robert?" I asked silently. What would you say to her? But no answer came. Only the ticking clock and the distant echoes of celebration. They thought they could break me tonight, humiliate me, corner me, use my love as leverage. I sipped my tea and let the bitterness ground me. No, Evelyn, you are not broken. You are not done. Not yet. The sunroom was already warm when she arrived the next morning. Lily stood in the doorway, dressed carefully. A soft pink blouse, no jewelry, hair loosely pulled back like she wanted to look gentle, remorseful. I knew better. "Mother," she said softly, "can we talk?" I motioned toward the wicker chair across from me without a word. My tea was already brewed. 2 cups. I had expected this. She sat down, crossing her legs delicately. A rehearsed pause hung between us. Then the act began. I wanted to apologize for last night," she said, her voice trembling just enough. "It got out of hand. I didn't mean for it to go so far." I took a sip of my tea and let her words hang there, unanswered. She fidgeted under my silence. "You have to understand," she continued, voice dipping into that soft, manipulative tone I recognized too well. "We're just concerned about you, about your health, about how overwhelming managing everything has become." There it was. The setup. "You've been so strong for so long, Mother," she said, reaching for my hand. I let her take it, though it took everything in me not to pull away. "But maybe it's time to let someone help. You shouldn't have to carry this burden anymore." Her husband's words echoed in my mind from last night. "You're not getting any younger." "And what kind of help did you have in mind?" I asked calmly, watching her closely. She smiled. That same tight, patronizing smile she always used when she thought she was being clever. "Daniel and I have been speaking with a few people, financial advisors, estate planners. We could manage things for you. Take the stress off your shoulders. Handle the paperwork, the property." There it was, the real reason she came. I leaned back slightly, still holding my teacup. "The property." "Yes," she said quickly. "We're not trying to take anything away from you. We just want to secure it, for the family, for the future. You could focus on enjoying your life, travel, rest, spend time with your friends." The casual way she tried to sell my surrender made my stomach turn, as if I was a child being coaxed into handing over my allowance. I forced a soft smile. "That's very thoughtful of you, dear." Relief flashed across her face. She thought I was bending. "But I've managed this house for over 40 years, I continued. "And I think I can manage it a little longer." Her smile faltered, her fingers tightening around the porcelain cup. "Mother, we're just thinking long term. Daniel knows people. We could simplify everything." I set my cup down gently. "You're very concerned about me, Lily. I appreciate that." She blinked, uncertain of where this was going. "Why don't we talk more about it soon? I said, my tone light. But not today. I need some fresh air. I stood. The conversation was over. For now. But the battle had just begun. It was barely noon when I heard it. I had stepped into the hallway to retrieve a book from the library. The door to the downstairs office was cracked open. I wasn't supposed to be home, or so they thought. Their voices drifted up the hall, low but urgent. "We need to move faster, Daniel," Lily whispered. "She's more stubborn than I expected." Daniel's voice came sharp. "That's why we need Dr. Stanford involved. If she's declared mentally unfit, it's over. No need for her signature, no more stalling. It'll be clean." My pulse quickened, but I remained perfectly still. "And he's willing?" Lily asked. "Of course he is. We've been paying his clinic enough these past 2 years. He'll write whatever assessment we need." There was a short pause, followed by Daniel's chuckle. "The sooner we get the deed, the sooner we sell. With this market, we could easily clear $2 million before year's end. Wipe out my debts completely." Lily's voice lowered even more. "And Mother won't have to worry about anything anymore. Once she's declared incompetent, the court will assign us full control. We'll put her in that luxury care facility in Virginia. She'll be comfortable. No more arguing." The audacity, the sheer arrogance of it nearly made me gasp. But I stayed frozen, my hand gripping the edge of the bookshelf for balance. I couldn't make a sound. Not yet. Not until I had more. Daniel's voice turned cold. "We need the paperwork ready before she changes her mind again, and keep her thinking we're on her side until it's done." "Don't spook her," Lily sighed. "I can handle her. She still thinks I care." I slowly backed away from the door, every step deliberate, careful not to let the hardwood creak beneath my feet. When I reached the far end of the hallway, I allowed myself to breathe. They were trying to have me declared mentally unfit. My own daughter. For years, I had convinced myself Lily's selfishness was immaturity, that she would grow out of it. But this was something else entirely. This was betrayal. I returned to the study, closed the door softly behind me, and sat down at my desk. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the rush of clarity surging through me. They had made one fatal mistake. They thought I was still the fragile old woman who needed protecting, but they had no idea who they were playing with. The next morning, I didn't allow myself the luxury of rage. Anger, I knew, was useless if it didn't serve a purpose. I needed clarity. I needed allies. I reached for the phone sitting on my nightstand, its worn receiver cool in my hand. My fingers hovered over the familiar number before I pressed dial. I hadn't called Martha in months, not because we'd grown apart, but because she had always respected my need for quiet. Her voice answered on the second ring, warm and steady as always. "Evelyn, my word, it's been too long." I let out a quiet breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Martha, dear, do you have time for a private chat?" "Of course. Are you all right?" I paused. "Not quite. I could use your counsel." Her tone shifted instantly, sharpening. "Where shall we meet?" "Not here. Too many ears in this house." I glanced toward the hallway instinctively. "The little cafe near St. Augustine's. Noon? I'll be there." The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived, save for 2 elderly men playing chess in the corner. I chose a table by the window. Within minutes, Martha appeared, gliding through the door in her usual understated elegance. Pearl earrings, gray tailored coat, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She sat across from me, folding her hands. "Tell me everything." I didn't hesitate. I laid it out. The scene at the party, Lily's visit yesterday, and most of all, the conversation I overheard in the garden. Martha listened without interrupting, her lips pressed into a thin line as the story unfolded. By the time I finished, her expression was cold, measured. "They're not just playing games anymore," I said softly. "They're trying to erase me." Martha nodded. "And fast. If they're already talking to a doctor willing to sign off on an incompetency filing, you have very little time." I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, grounding myself in its warmth. "I need to move before they do." Martha leaned forward. "You need evidence. Solid, Irrefutable evidence that they're conspiring to strip you of your legal rights. Quietly, discreetly. The last thing you want is to tip them off too early. I met her gaze. I was hoping you'd say that. Her eyes softened for a moment, the old friendship glimmering through. You've always had a quiet strength, Evelyn. But this requires more than strength. This requires precision. I nodded. I'm ready. Martha exhaled, already shifting into the methodical mind that had once presided over countless courtrooms. You need someone who can gather information without drawing attention. A private investigator. Someone with discretion. I smiled faintly. I may know someone. Martha smiled back, her voice steady. Good. But remember, play the part they expect. Frail, grateful, helpless. I've been underestimated my whole life, I said calmly. I know how to wear that face. Martha reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. Then let's make sure they regret it. Outside, the wind carried the first hints of autumn. Inside, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Control. 2 days later, I met Mr. Green. We sat in the corner of a modest hotel lobby, just far enough from the other patrons for privacy. He was exactly as Martha had described, discreet, calm, not flashy, the kind of man who knew how to listen first and talk second. That's why I chose this hotel, far from town, far from familiar eyes. He sipped his black coffee and glanced at the folder I had handed him. Your friend gave me some background, Mrs. Carrington, but this, he tapped the folder lightly, this fills in quite a few gaps. Inside were copies of recent financial activity, odd transfers Lily had initiated, and Daniel's failed business ventures that somehow kept bleeding cash. They want my house, I said bluntly, and they're prepared to lie, to claim I'm unfit, whatever it takes. Mr. Green nodded slowly. It's becoming common, unfortunately. Family members see opportunity. The courts see an aging parent and assume dependency. Except I'm not dependent. My voice was sharper than I intended. That's why you're here. He smiled slightly. Not warm, but respectful. You need proof, evidence that shows intent, not just concern. He reached into his satchel and handed me a small device. Simple, barely larger than a key fob. Voice recorder, he explained. Legal for personal use in this state, as long as one party knows it's being recorded. That party is you. I turned it over in my hand. So small, so ordinary. Yet it could dismantle their entire plan. Record every conversation that feels relevant, he continued. If they mention plans, finances, the doctor, anything, keep them talking. Stay calm. The more natural you act, the more they'll reveal. And the doctor? I asked. I'll look into him. His association with your son-in-law is likely documented somewhere. Payments, referrals, conflicts of interest. For a moment, I simply stared at him. At this man, a stranger, calmly placing bricks into the foundation of my defense. It wasn't the way I imagined protecting my home at this stage of my life. But here I was. And the cost? I finally asked, steady. He smiled again, this time with a faint touch of humor. Let's call it a family rate. Your judge friend already arranged most of it. I exhaled slowly. Gratitude tightened my throat, but I kept my composure. Thank you, I said. I don't intend to lose this house, Mr. Green. Not to them. You won't, he said plainly. As long as you're willing to fight. I left that hotel with the recorder tucked safely in my purse. My steps felt heavier than usual, not with fear, but with the weight of knowing that everything had shifted. The clock had started ticking. They thought I would fold. Instead, I had just started. A week later, with everything simmering beneath the surface, I sent the invitation. Just a simple message through Lily's assistant. A quiet dinner at home. Casual, comfortable. Predictably, they accepted immediately. When they arrived that evening, they were all smiles, overly polite. Brent carried a bottle of expensive wine like a man making an offering to a temple he planned to knock down. Lily leaned in to kiss my cheek as if nothing had ever happened. Mother, you're looking well, she said with that falsely cheerful tone that was becoming her trademark. I smiled sweetly. Thank you, dear. I'm trying to take better care of myself, you know. Less stress? Brent chuckled, setting the wine down. That's exactly why we keep encouraging you to let us help with the heavy stuff. Ah, already setting the stage. He couldn't wait 5 minutes before circling back to it. I guided them to the dining room, where I had prepared their favorites. A subtle reminder of who still held this house together. Roast beef, honey-glazed carrots, fresh baked bread. The table gleamed under the soft chandelier light. We ate, we chatted. Lily kept the conversation light. Vacation plans, a new interior designer she was working with, some charity event she was chairing. But the undercurrent was always there. A rehearsed ease, as if they were keeping me calm before lowering the net. After dessert, Brent carefully broached it. So, Mother, have you had a chance to think more about the transfer paperwork we discussed? I set my fork down, folded my napkin in my lap, and nodded softly. Yes, dear, I have. I let my voice quiver just enough. You're both so kind to think of my well-being. It's overwhelming, honestly. I don't know where I'd even start with all those documents. Brent leaned in slightly, eyes gleaming with the scent of victory. That's why we're here. We can walk you through everything. You won't have to worry about a thing. Lily chimed in, squeezing my hand. We want you to enjoy life, Mother, free from all these complicated responsibilities. I lowered my gaze, blinking as if trying to hold back grateful tears. You're right. I suppose it's only a matter of time before I start forgetting things, like your father did toward the end. The brief flicker of satisfaction in Brent's eyes nearly made me sick. They truly believed I was softening. I touched Lily's arm gently. But let's not rush, darling. I want to review everything carefully before signing anything. You know your father always taught me to be thorough. Brent kept his grin intact, but I caught the tightness in his jaw. Of course. Take your time. We'll have our attorney send over the preliminary drafts. Lily added quickly. And we'll make sure it's all very simple. You won't have to read through piles of confusing paperwork. I smiled, pretending to be comforted. That's very thoughtful. We finished the evening with coffee and small talk. I offered them leftover pastries to take home, like any good mother trying to please her children. As I watched them walk out to their car, Brent with his arm around Lily's waist, I kept my soft smile in place until the taillights disappeared down the driveway. Only once they were gone did I let my face harden. They saw what they wanted to see. A grateful, aging woman finally folding under their careful manipulation. But they hadn't seen what was coming next. And that made me dangerous. 3 days later, the letter arrived. It came by courier, hand-delivered, as if to make it feel official, urgent. The envelope was thick, embossed with the name of a law firm I had never heard of. One of Daniel's connections, no doubt. I opened it calmly, though my hands wanted to shake. Inside was a full set of documents. Property transfer, paperwork. Deed transfer authorization. Financial power of attorney agreements. Neatly typed, clean, and efficient. All prepared. All awaiting only one thing, my signature. And there it was. Lily's signature already neatly scrawled on the bottom lines. Daniel's as well. The only blank spot left was mine. A chill spread through me, like ice working its way under my skin. They weren't waiting for my consent anymore. They were assuming it. The audacity was staggering. They were ready to walk into court with these papers, ready to say I had agreed, that I was overwhelmed, that I had entrusted them. I stared at the papers a long while, letting the weight of what they were attempting settle fully in my chest. It wasn't just greed. It was calculation, precision, legal theft wrapped in a silk ribbon of concern. I set the papers aside and reached for my phone. Martha answered before the second ring. It's escalated, I said. My voice was cold, steady. Tell me. I laid it all out. The letter, the signatures, the blanks. Her silence on the other end was thick with restrained fury. They've already signed for you? She asked finally. Yes. That's forgery if they attempt to submit this without your consent. They know that, I said flatly. That's why they're pushing so hard for me to agree before they do. Martha exhaled sharply. Good. Let them keep pushing. Do not confront them directly. Not yet. Her voice lowered, precise, judicial. The more they pressure you, the more valuable your recordings become. And if they get desperate enough to present these documents prematurely, it will be even better for us. I closed my eyes, grounding myself in her words. They're arrogant, Evelyn. That's what will break them. I opened my eyes again, feeling that quiet fire returning to my chest. Let's make sure it does. Martha arrived at my home the following afternoon. We sat together in the sunroom, far from any overhearing staff or listening devices my daughter might have thought clever to install. She wore her reading glasses low on her nose, flipping through the thick legal packet with sharp, deliberate care. The only sound was the faint rustling of the pages and the distant ticking of the antique clock. When she finished, she set the papers down and folded her hands. They're moving faster than I expected, I nodded. They think I'm ready to surrender. Her lips pressed together. There are loopholes in this, Evelyn, enough for a solid challenge if it ever reached a court. But you and I both know this isn't about legal strength right now. This is about timing. They're counting on you being too frightened, too overwhelmed, to ask the right questions. They're counting on me being weak, I said calmly, and I've allowed them to see exactly that. Martha smiled thinly. Good. You've given them rope. The more they take, the tighter the noose when we pull. I poured her tea. Steady hands, steady voice. You don't think they suspect I'm aware of their plan? Not yet, she sipped, her tone cool and clinical. If anything, they likely see your caution as typical hesitation. They're banking on that doctor declaring you incompetent any day now. Once that medical declaration is filed, they'll move to seize everything in one clean motion. And when they do, I asked, can we stop them? Martha's eyes sharpened. We won't stop them then. We'll stop them before. That's why Mr. Green's work is so important. If we secure recordings, financial records, and any evidence of coercion, we won't just block them, we'll bury them. Her confidence was like a balm to my nerves. For years, I had handled this estate alone. But legal warfare was not my battlefield. That's why I called Martha. That's why I trusted her. She leaned forward slightly. Evelyn, I need you to continue playing the role. The more they believe you're folding, the more aggressive they'll get. Don't refuse any new requests outright. Stall gently. Nod. Appear overwhelmed. Encourage them to press harder. I smiled faintly. You do enjoy this more than you should, Martha chuckled. I spent 30 years watching people like your daughter parade into courtrooms, thinking they'd outsmart the law. Entitlement always makes them sloppy. I stirred my tea slowly, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I keep wondering, Martha, when did she stop seeing me as her mother? When did I become nothing more than an obstacle to her ambition? Martha reached across and touched my hand. You stopped feeding her hunger, Evelyn, and people like Lily, they don't love anyone who tells them no. I swallowed hard, but held her gaze. Then let's make sure the next no is the last one they ever hear. Martha squeezed my hand gently. It will be. I promise you that. For the next week, I played my part with perfection. The frail, agreeable old woman, the confused mother, grateful for their help. I let them visit often, let them bring their prepared speeches, their gentle manipulations wrapped in forced smiles and soft voices. We sat on the veranda one afternoon, the warm breeze fluttering the edges of the lace tablecloth. The house, my house, gleamed behind them. And behind my calm smile, I watched the two of them weaving their little web, utterly convinced they had me trapped. Lily poured me tea, as she always did now, as though serving me would somehow make her seem nurturing. Mother, are you sure you don't want to sign before things get too complicated? You know, while you're still feeling clear-headed. Daniel chimed in, perfectly timed. It would save everyone a great deal of future headaches. You wouldn't want the courts involved. They tend to make these things unpleasant. I sipped my tea, keeping my voice light. Of course, dear, but I'd like to speak to my financial advisor first, just to be safe. A flicker passed across Daniel's eyes. He didn't like that answer, but he was still too confident to push too hard. Oh, of course, Lily said quickly, smoothing it over. Take your time, Mother. We only want what's best. The recorder nestled behind my chair caught every word. They wanted me to rush. They wanted me pressured. They wanted to create a false sense of urgency. That's why they kept visiting, hovering, dropping hints about my declining faculties every chance they got. Each time they repeated it, each time they let it slip, it became stronger evidence in my favor. And I let them. I even pretended to get confused once, forgetting which file they'd asked me to sign last time. Lily jumped at the chance to offer help, Daniel correcting me like I was a child lost in her own paperwork. All of it recorded. Every condescending glance. Every veiled threat wrapped in polite concern. The game was simple now. Let them believe they were closing in. Let them think they had almost won. The longer the rope, the harder the snap when it tightens. That night, long after Lily had gone and the house had returned to its deep, familiar silence, I went to the library. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the shelves. I stood in front of the tall bookcase for a long moment, my fingertips tracing over the spines of old volumes until I found them. Robert's journals. 3 thick, leather-bound books, worn but carefully preserved. He had kept them meticulously, right up until the last months of his life. I carried them to the reading chair and opened the first one. His handwriting was steady and clean, just as I remembered. March 17th. Lily's ambition worries me. She's clever, yes, but too easily dazzled by wealth. Brent encourages it. I see it in the way he flatters her, always suggesting she deserves more. I fear where this path may lead once I'm gone. I read the words again, letting them soak through me like cold water. Robert had seen it coming. Even then. June 2nd. I must talk to Evelyn again about securing proper legal protections. The house is in both our names, but I worry what Brent may attempt later. Evelyn trusts too easily where family is concerned. She always believes people will choose love over greed. I pray she's right. But I must prepare as though she's not. I closed my eyes. He had tried to warn me. I turned more pages, the dates slowly crawling toward the year he passed. His writing grew more hurried near the end, but his concerns never changed. December 4th. If Evelyn ever faces them alone, I hope she remembers this. Quiet does not mean weak. Calm does not mean powerless. Patience wins wars. The weight of his words pressed into my chest. I ran my hand along the page gently, as if touching him one last time. I had been patient. For years. For Lily's sake. For the sake of peace. But that peace had rotted into quiet poison. And now, finally, I could feel something stronger rising beneath my grief. Not rage, but resolve. I wasn't afraid of losing this house. I was done losing myself. I flipped to the back of the journal and found one final note he had scribbled, almost like a parting message. If they ever try to take what we built, don't beg. Don't plead. Show them who you are. A slow breath filled my lungs. My hands stopped shaking. My mind was clear. They thought I was fragile. They thought the years had hollowed me out into something soft and easy to break. But they never knew where my real strength lived. Robert did. I set the journals back on the shelf, smoothing my blouse as I stood. "Thank you, my love," I whispered into the quiet. Now I know exactly what I have to do. The war was no longer coming. It had arrived. Mr. Green called me 2 days later. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he began, his voice calm but edged with quiet urgency. "I believe you'll want to hear what I've found." I met him again at the Carlton Hotel. Same corner booth, same quiet background music. This time, I brought no tea, no pleasantries, only my sharpened focus. He slid a slim folder across the table. "Your son-in-law's situation is far more precarious than you may have realized." I opened it. His findings were neatly organized. Account statements, real estate development contracts, loan agreements. But every page screamed one word: desperation. "The Ridgeview project?" I asked. He nodded. "They're bleeding money. Brent overleveraged the entire project. He's borrowed against every asset they hold. Private lenders, too. Not just banks. High-interest loans. Quiet investors who won't tolerate default." I flipped through the documents, my stomach tightening. If Ridgeview collapses, they lose everything. The house, their cars, even their personal accounts. And my estate would be the only viable safety net left. Exactly. He leaned in slightly. That's why Brent's pushing Lily so hard. If they can secure full control of your property before the financial collapse, they'll flip it for a quick sale. Fast cash. They're not trying to protect you, Mrs. Hawthorne. They're trying to survive. I closed the folder slowly, absorbing every word. They've already arranged a potential buyer for the house, Mr. Green added. A developer with plans to gut the property for subdivision. The papers are ready for a quick transfer once your name is off the deed. My stomach turned at the thought. Not just the house, our house. The home Robert built with his own hands, the gardens he planted, the library he designed. Gone, bulldozed for profit. But beneath the sting, I felt something else. Clarity. They're moving fast because they're afraid, I said softly. They know time isn't on their side. Desperation always breeds mistakes, Green replied, and you're giving them just enough rope to tighten their own noose. I met his gaze firmly. I want every piece of this documented. Every phone call. Every meeting. I want a file so airtight it'll crush them the moment they try to file for guardianship. You'll have it, he assured me. My team is already monitoring Brent's financial movements. We're also quietly recording conversations between his associates. He's getting sloppy. I allowed myself a quiet, bitter smile. And Lily? Still playing the dutiful daughter, but she's growing impatient. Brent's fear is bleeding into her now. She's not as skilled at hiding it. I leaned back, my mind already assembling the next moves. Then we stay patient. Let them push harder. Yes, Mr. Green agreed. The closer they think they are to victory, the more reckless they'll become. We stood to leave, departing separately once again. As I stepped outside into the cool autumn air, I inhaled deeply. The winds were shifting now, stronger, colder, but I stood taller than I had in years. For so long, I had been their quiet, accommodating mother, the one they thought would eventually fold. But I wasn't folding, I was waiting, and soon they would learn the difference. The night I made my move was quiet. No fanfare, no confrontation, just steady hands and clear purpose. The documents lay before me on the heavy oak desk in Martha's private office. The air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. A notary sat to one side, flipping through each page carefully as we went, methodical and unhurried. Martha stood behind me, her presence calm and steady. This structure is ironclad, Evelyn. They won't be able to touch a single brick once this is filed. I nodded. Exactly as we planned. The Langley family, irrevocable trust. Every asset, the house, the grounds, the investment accounts, now placed under legal protection, entirely outside of Lily and Brent's reach. The trust would preserve everything, not just from them, but from anyone who dared attempt to leverage my so-called frailty ever again. The notary slid the final page toward me, his pen resting gently on top. Signature here, Mrs. Hawthorne. I didn't hesitate. My hand moved with perfect precision as I signed my name across the page. Evelyn Margaret Hawthorne. The notary affixed his seal with a soft click, then handed the completed packet to Martha. She slipped it into a heavy leather folder with quiet satisfaction. It's done, she said softly. Effective immediately. You are the sole trustee. No successor assigned. No transfer authorized without your explicit direction. I exhaled, a slow release of breath that carried years of quiet dread with it. No court can reverse this? Not without your consent. They'd have to prove fraud, duress, or mental incompetence before today's signing, she assured me. And thanks to your perfectly measured confusion, we have recordings, written logs, and witnesses documenting your full clarity leading up to this filing. I allowed myself a small smile. They think I've been growing weaker. And every time I nodded along to their schemes, I was pulling the walls tighter around them. Martha smiled back, her eyes gleaming with quiet pride. You've played this better than most litigators I've known, Evelyn. It was never a game to me, I replied. It's my home. She closed the folder and tapped it gently. Now we wait. The moment they attempt to file their guardianship petition, we'll move to expose everything they've done. And trust me, Brent's financial dealings will be far more damaging in court than any false claims they make about your health." The notary stood and quietly excused himself, leaving us alone. As the clock ticked on the wall, I sat back, letting the finality of it all settle in. For months, I had endured their careful manipulations, their staged kindness, their rehearsed pity. They thought they had broken me. They thought this house was already theirs. Now, not only would they never touch it, they would soon stand exposed for who they truly were. I looked over at Martha, steady and composed beside me. "Let's see how brave they are when the papers arrive," I said softly. Martha smiled, eyes sharp as glass. "Oh, they'll come running, and they won't even see it coming." Outside the window, the leaves rattled against the tall iron gates that sealed the estate, and for the first time in a long while I felt completely untouchable. I invited them one last time. No pretense this evening. No carefully staged tea or gentle coaxing. Just a simple request. I'd like to review the documents together before signing anything. Please bring Brent. They arrived promptly, as expected, too eager, too certain. Lily wore that same polished confidence I'd seen at the party, the one that used to make me question myself. Not tonight. Brent stood beside her, perfectly composed, like a man convinced the finish line was within reach. We met in the parlor, the large fireplace crackling behind me as they sat across the small coffee table. The trust papers, the ones they didn't know existed, remained locked in my study down the hall. Lily smiled sweetly. "Mother, you look lovely tonight. Are you ready to go over the paperwork?" I returned her smile, calm, warm even. "Actually, I thought we'd review something else first." Brent's brow furrowed. "Something else?" I reached beside me and set the small black recorder on the table. "You may remember this." I pressed play. Their own voices filled the room, crisp, clear. The conversation from the garden weeks ago, played out in haunting detail. "If we wait, we risk her finding other counsel. Dr. Alden is willing to do the evaluation. Once she's deemed unfit, we gain full legal control." "Fine. Set it up." Lily's face drained of color. Brent's jaw locked tight. I let it play a moment longer before shutting it off. The silence afterward was suffocating. "I've been many things to you both," I said softly. "A mother, a safety net, a fool, perhaps. But what I am not, what I have never been, is helpless." Lily stammered first, her voice tight. "Mother, that conversation was, taken entirely in context," I finished for her, "and legally recorded within my own home. Brent tried to regain control. You don't understand the position we're in. We were only trying to protect the family estate." "No," I said calmly. "You were trying to save yourselves from your own financial disaster. Ridgeview is failing, Brent. Your lenders are circling, and you saw me. This house, as your last option." Lily shook her head, voice trembling now. "You don't know what you're talking about." I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady, almost kind. "I know everything. I know about the private loans, the hidden accounts, the pending sale agreement for this property. You've been very busy behind my back." They froze. Neither spoke. I allowed the pause to stretch, forcing them to sit in the weight of their unraveling. "Effective as of last week," I continued, "this entire estate, every asset, has been placed into a protected trust, an irrevocable trust. You have no claim, no path forward, no inheritance waiting for you." Brent's mask cracked first, anger rising beneath his fading composure. "You can't do that. You're not competent?" I finished softly, locking my gaze on his. "That was your hope, wasn't it? A false declaration of incompetence, a doctor bribed into signing what you couldn't earn." I paused, my voice dropping lower. "You were very wrong." Lily broke then, tears streaming, her voice pleading now. "Mother, please, we didn't mean. We thought. I shook my head, keeping my voice gentle but unyielding. No, Lily, you thought I was weak. And now, you've shown me exactly who you are. The air thickened. They didn't know it yet, but the worst was still coming. I let the silence sit for a long moment, long enough for Lily's tears to turn into soft whimpers, long enough for Brent to start calculating his way out of a trap that no longer had exits. Then, softly, I added the final weight. I've already reported everything to the authorities. Brent's head snapped up. What? His voice cracked, finally losing its polished edge. Lily's face contorted. Mother, you called the police? I looked at them both. Not with hatred, not even with anger anymore. Only with the calm certainty of a woman who had finally stepped fully into her power. Yes. My voice never rose above a whisper. I provided the recordings, the financial records, every document Mr. Green gathered. You didn't just try to manipulate me. You committed fraud. You conspired to declare me legally incompetent for financial gain. That is elder abuse under state law. And it carries real consequences. Brent shot up from his chair, pacing now like a cornered animal. You don't understand what you're doing. No, Brent. I kept my tone even. For the first time, I understand exactly what I'm doing. The knock came sharply against the front door, slicing through the tension like a blade. They both froze. Another knock, louder this time. Maria, waiting in the hall, opened the door. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, followed closely by a plainclothes detective. Professional. Calm. Efficient. Mrs. Hawthorne? The detective asked politely. We're here regarding your filed complaint. I rose from my chair, my hands steady. Yes, detective. They're right here. I gestured toward Brent and Lily. Brent's face blanched. You can't be serious. You can't have us arrested over this. The detective was already stepping forward, firm and quiet. Mr. Anderson, you're being detained for questioning under suspicion of fraud, attempted financial exploitation, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. As the officer read his rights, Brent sputtered protests, his voice rising into desperation. You can't prove anything. She's twisting everything. The detective lifted the recorder from the table. We have hours of your own words. That'll speak just fine. Lily broke completely, falling to her knees beside my chair, clutching at my hand. Mother, please don't do this. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was scared. Brent made me. I looked down at her, not pulling my hand away, but not offering comfort either. You made your choices, Lily. You had chances to stop. You didn't. Tears streamed down her face as the officers gently pulled her up, cuffing her wrists. Outside, I could see some of the neighbors gathering along the edge of the long driveway, whispers already spreading, faces peeking from windows, phones raised, capturing the fall. The detective turned back to me. We'll keep you updated, Mrs. Hawthorne. Your attorney will receive full copies of all statements. Thank you, detective, I said calmly. As the officers led them out, Brent still shouting and Lily sobbing, I stood completely still, hands folded, breathing in the sharp evening air that drifted in through the open front door. For years they had circled this house like vultures. Tonight, I buried them with their own greed. The flashing blue lights painted my front lawn in cold, rhythmic pulses. I stood at the top of the steps, watching it unfold with an unsettling sense of peace. The neighbors had come out quickly, as I knew they would. Mr. and Mrs. Dalton from next door, huddled together near their gate, whispering behind cupped hands. Further down the street, the Whitakers stood by their mailbox, their teenage son holding up his phone, recording. The Ridley twins leaned out from their balcony, exchanging wide-eyed glances. This wasn't just gossip. This was scandal. The golden daughter and her charming husband dragged out of the very estate they once bragged about inheriting soon. The show was better than anything the neighborhood book club could have dreamt up. Brent's voice carried down the drive as the officers loaded him into the cruiser. This is a mistake. This is all lies. You'll regret this. But his voice was smaller now. Strangled. Lily, sobbing uncontrollably, barely managed to stay upright as they guided her into the second vehicle. Her mascara streaked down her face, staining the expensive white blouse she'd probably chosen for tonight's victory meeting. I stood perfectly still, my spine tall, my hands folded gently in front of me as if welcoming guests to a garden party rather than a public reckoning. Maria appeared quietly at my side, her voice low. "Do you want me to close the door, ma'am?" "Not yet," I replied. "Let them see." She nodded, understanding without needing explanation. For years, I had allowed my silence to be mistaken for weakness. Tonight, the entire neighborhood could see how wrong they'd been. The detective stepped up to me once more as the cruisers pulled away. "We'll keep you informed as things progress, Mrs. Hawthorne. Their financial records are extensive. This may take time." "I have nothing but time, detective," I answered softly. He offered me a respectful nod before turning to leave. The gates slowly closed behind the departing vehicles with a heavy mechanical hum, sealing the estate once again. The whispers among the neighbors grew fainter as the spectacle ended, but I knew they would feast on this story for months. I didn't care. I turned to Maria. "Now you can close the door." She did, gently, locking it with a soft click. The house exhaled into its familiar, peaceful quiet. I stood in the grand foyer for a moment, absorbing the emptiness. No more rehearsed visits. No more fake concern. No more hovering manipulation disguised as love. For the first time in years, this house felt like mine again. Entirely. Undisputed. Untouched by their hands. I walked to the parlor and sat where Lily had pleaded just an hour earlier. My teacup was still there, untouched and cooling. I sipped it now, savoring the simple warmth. It wasn't triumph I felt. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was something far quieter, freedom,